Hi, I'm DV LeBron with the Ellis Talker Show. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Brian Harrison, our Texas representative. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I am really doing well. Excited to be with you. I feel like it's been too long since we've done this, my friend.
Yes, it has, and I love having you on to update the people of Ellis County. And you know, this Texas legislation session is in full swing, and there's a
We
lot of
are.
things going on. I mean, I'm hearing things from school choice to grid to border to gender modification, and you have been busy. So I wanted
Yes.
to have you on to tell the district kind of what you've been doing. So one of the things that came up, you know, recently was one of the things that have come up is high speed rail,
Yep.
because they've seen the boondoggle that's happened in California. And while that's not one of the super top issues, it's still property rights. So I wanted you to address that.
Oh, it's incredibly important. And DV, we have been so busy since the session got kicked off here, but a little over a month ago. And one of the things that's been most important to me is to make sure that I followed through on the promises that I made to the 200,000 Texans who were who put their trust in me to be their fighter and their voice for freedom and for liberty, to protect the God-given rights and freedoms that we have. And so, no, you don't hear high-speed rail getting news all across the state. Perhaps it should, because projects like that one in particular that are so destructive of private property rights need to be taken seriously. And I absolutely gave my word to do everything I could to stop that program. And I'm proud to have filed a bill just, I think, within the last week, to what I believe would stop that program once and for all. The way that the Supreme Court in Texas was sort of allowing them to continue going on with their authority, which is really ghastly. Think about this. They're allowing this private company, not even the government, a private company to exercise eminent domain, meaning they can just steal your property. A private company, not the government, through eminent domain, was because the Supreme Court was interpreting a law that's about 100 years old. And if you think about the rails that were, being contemplated back then, it wasn't this high-speed rail construct. This is old intercontinental railroad type of stuff. And so I filed a bill to update that law. And I believe that would keep the courts from giving that company the power to use eminent domain to steal people's land, destroy their property, wreck their home property values, and finally put a death nail in this boondoggle, as you called it. And I agree. When I put out a statement filing the bill, I called this project a boondoggle. It's what it is. I filed a bill to stop it, and I look forward to that hopefully passing here this session.
Well, I definitely, the boondoggle goes with, I mean, that is a great way to describe that anyway. So I'm sorry, I did plagiarize a little bit there.
No, I love the word. In fact, I told my staff to put that in my quote. One of my staff said, "Do you really want to use the word boondoggle, Representative?" I'm like, "I want to use the word boondoggle." So you use it all you want, my buddy.
Boondoggle it is. So, along with property rights there and determining whether somebody can run a rail through your property, there's another thing that really, really strikes at the core of who we are as Texans. Are we free, and are we, do we embrace the mantra of Texans? And that's property taxes. When somebody can be taxed out of their home, are we really free? Are we really a representative of what we're supposed to be in Texans if there are Texans losing their homes for property taxes? What has been going on that front?
Well, I have been very focused on that issue. DV, I was talking to a county clerk not too long ago, just hearing story after story about Texans who are losing their home to property taxes. I fundamentally believe property taxes is an unethical system of taxation. Texans are being taxed out of their home. Okay, property taxes are out of control. They don't know who's responsible. But I've got constituents that have had homes and property in their district for generations. They don't know if they're going to be able to stay living in Midlothian or Waxahachie or Ennis or even Ellis County. I have people, I ran into a guy at a dinner the other night, just told me he had to sell the 12 acres that he's had here for a long time because he can't afford it anymore. This is not right. And if you're responsible, let's say you or maybe your parents or your grandparents had a piece of property and they paid off the mortgage, you can call yourself a homeowner, but you're not. You're a renter, and the government is your landlord. So I think that property taxes are not compatible with private property rights. So they need to be abolished. I'll actually have some more announcements on that soon. I can't quite give it away just yet, but I'm not done filing legislation on the issue of property taxes. But I filed 2 bills that I'm happy to talk with you about and make sure folks back home know what I did. Because see, there's confusion. My constituents, your friends, your neighbors, maybe you, every year, your property taxes are going up and up and up. But you hear from local elected officials, well, we lowered your tax rates. And, go talk to the appraisal districts. And they go talk to the appraisal district. And they say, well, you got to go talk to the local officials. And there's this vicious and confusing shell game. And all Texans, hardworking Texans who are struggling to put food on the table, gas in the tank, they don't know if they're going to be able to stay in their homes. All they want to know is what's happening, who's responsible for my property taxes that are out of control. So I filed a bill to bring clarity to the situation and say to any property taxing entity in Texas, whether it's cities or counties or whatever, if you want to raise somebody's property taxes, do the right thing. Hold an election. Put the voters back in charge. Give the taxpayers the power and the authority once again over their private property. And then I filed another bill to say it shouldn't just be a simple majority. We need 60%. When we want to make it hard for the government to do things, like we do, for example, for amending the Constitution or whatever, it's common to have supermajorities. There are other states that have this, and I believe that you should have an election to raise property taxes, and that it should be 60% of the tax-paying voters who are struggling. They need to say, you know what, we agree. Whatever the project is you want to fund, that's fine, go do it. Or, you know what, our property taxes are too high, you should not raise those taxes.
Let me play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Having an election for every time the local entities need or tax revenue, or they want to raise a tax. I'm not going to say need. They want to raise a tax, right? That can create a serious backlog. Some say that could create a serious like the log jam that happens in Washington, and maybe things don't get done that need to get done. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, I say that's completely misguided, and I'll tell you why. I'm sure some people innocently believe that, but it's just not true. When you keep taxes at effectively the same rate, and buddy, we've got a high growth area. I mean, our district and our county have been pretty rural for a very long time, but there's a lot of people moving in here, right? And there's growth, and with the growth comes new infrastructure needs. You need to build new schools or build new roads. I understand that, and guess what? Texas law takes that into consideration. Just because property values go up, it doesn't mean your taxes have to go up. And even if you hold the rate the same, like don't raise taxes on people who have been in the community for years. If you keep their rate the same, or the effective rate, because of all the new growth that's coming in, when you hear me talk about saying, hey, I want people to adopt a no new revenue rate. I don't like the term no new revenue rate because it's very confusing. It makes people think that, hey, the city, if they adopt the no new revenue rate, they're going to get no new revenue. That's not true. If a city adopts a no new revenue rate, all that says is bring in or tax the current property owners the exact same way you're taxing them right now, this minute, while we're having the discussion. It still lets them bring in a ton of new revenue because everybody who's new to the area, every new business that comes into the area, that's a broadening of the tax base. So one of the big things that gets missed in the discussion when you talk about a no new revenue rate is that the no new revenue rate actually gives cities and counties a ton more money, more than enough to account for all the growth.
And there was a lot of that talk of no new revenue. And right now, I got interviews coming for all the bonds happening. There's a lot of bond elections coming up, and I'm trying to cover them. And then the candidates running for office, one of them who happens to be related to somebody I know.
I have no idea who you might be talking about.
I have them on, but along those lines of freedom.
Yeah.
COVID brought out a lot of stuff in government that was ugly. So I know that you've been busy with that. Mm-hmm. and vaccine mandates. So address the vaccine mandate thing, and then follow up on, because there's been people who say, well, that does that mean that you're going to be against all vaccines? Are you a anti-vaxxer? And now how is that going to affect those people? Can you address that?
No, it's a great question, but I mean, think about this. Is there a bigger line in the sand issue for liberty, for freedom-loving Texans, than to have to be forced to undergo a medical procedure against your wishes? If we say that that's okay in Texas, especially if it's being ordered by unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., I mean, we might as well give up on the 10th Amendment, the Constitution, federalism, medical freedom, informed consent. Just give up on it all. I am not going to stop talking about banning COVID vaccine mandates until we protect medical freedom of every Texan and finally ban COVID vaccine mandates. State after state has protected their citizens from these. I'm honestly embarrassed as a proud Texan that Texas is one of the states that has not yet protected the medical freedom of our citizens. So I've got the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act that I filed. It's got overwhelming support from my colleagues here in the House. We've got a senator who's carrying it over in the Senate. I believe we're going to pass that legislation this time. But here's the thing. I'm anti-mandate, but it doesn't mean you're anti-vax. What I am is I'm pro-liberty. And I am proud to have played a role during the Trump administration with Operation Warp Speed. I voluntarily was vaccinated for COVID myself. But you know what? That was a choice that I made with my family voluntarily. These were never meant to be mandated or forced on people. And especially now that we've got 2 years of data showing that, unfortunately, they're not as good at preventing transmission as we would like. There is not a shred of public health or other justification for these tyrannical and liberty-destroying mandates. And I'm going to do everything I can this session to make sure we protect the medical freedom of every one of the 30 million Texans that I'm proud to serve.
So along with the vax, there was more that happened during COVID. There was churches shut down. There were, you can't go to church, but you could go to Walmart. You won't get it at Walmart, but you'll get it at church. Yeah. There was a lot of things that happened, and there has to be an account to that. Yeah. And so I heard you filed a bill on that, on the governor's powers. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, never-ending emergency orders and executive powers, those are incompatible with representative government. You remember, the Schoolhouse Rock video and how a bill becomes a law, and you elect officials, and then they have to debate it, and then the Congress has to agree with the Senate, and then they have to agree with the president. The Constitution sets a very high bar to allow the state to deprive anybody of freedom, of life, of liberty. That's the point of these constitutional documents, because our founders understood that our rights and our liberties and our freedoms, they don't come from government, just the opposite. The role of government is to protect our liberty. It's to protect our freedoms. And the only way that the government is allowed to govern you is with your consent, and you give your consent through your elected officials. But the problem is, with all these COVID emergencies and the executive actions, we're depriving the people of a voice in their government by giving so much power either to one official or worse, especially at the federal level, to unelected bureaucrats. So I filed a bill to completely overhaul how we handle emergencies in the state of Texas, because right now, as we saw during COVID, a governor in the state of Texas, and this is not unique to Governor Abbott. This is an issue that predated him. The legislature passed these laws in the 1970s, I believe. The governor has effectively all the power anytime the governor declares an emergency. So we could have a future terrible governor who comes in and says, you know what, I agree with Joe Biden or the Democrats administration, CDC, who says that, gun violence is a public health threat, or that carbon emissions are a public health emergency. And because I believe it's an emergency, I'm going to declare an emergency, and I'm going to shut down every firearms shop in Texas. I'm going to ban any car with an internal combustion engine, and I'm going to outlaw automobile dealers. It might sound crazy, but as I'm sitting here, that is the state of law and emergency powers in the state of Texas. We can never allow one official to have that much authority. So I filed a bill. It's House Bill 911, which is funny. It's my emergency powers bill, House Bill 911. We've got to pass it to put the people back in charge and never, ever, ever allow one official to have the total power to shut down any business and deprive people of life and liberty of freedom unless their representatives say so. So I give the governor, 30 days if there's an emergency, but then the legislature must be immediately called back. And if we don't vote on it, those emergency orders go away.
So he'd have to keep getting reauthorized.
Yep.
Or they could. Does the bill stop them from just doing another one, and then you
yes.
have to wait?
Nope. He cannot file. So what it basically says is, because I want to give some, discretion. So if there's a real, no kidding, imminent emergency and somebody has to make a life or death decision, I let that happen. But then I say nothing that he has done under emergency authorities can last for more than 30 days, and no emergency declaration. We still live under the COVID emergency declaration in Texas. I think we're one of 1 or 2 Republican states that right now, as I speak, still lives under a COVID emergency order. There's no excuse for that. There is no justification for that. All COVID emergency orders should end. But yeah, my bill would say any emergency order can only last 30 days, and the legislature has to come back to Austin, and we have to have a chance to represent our voters and say, you know what, we agree with this or we don't agree with it. But what I'm fighting for here is to make sure that the people that I represent are empowered to be in control of their own lives, to make decisions that determine their liberty.
What I noticed, Brian, is, a lot of things that sound far-fetched and, oh, you're just a kook. I mean, there were things that were said before when people would say, oh, they just want amnesty. And they would say, oh, that's kook. That's ridiculous. And I remember those arguments. That I'm old enough to remember those arguments. That's ridiculous. And then you see them give, try to give amnesty to illegal immigrant children, and then okay, their parents, and the parents got shot down, but now they're dreamers. I do want to get to the border before I close out, but I wanted to ask you, because there's another thing, and I want to preface this, because it goes with freedom. School choice. Other Republican states have gone with school choice. There are benefits and there are potential drawbacks. There are people that I respect dearly that disagree on this issue, on school choice, and have a principled argument against it. So I want to know, where do you stand on school choice, and maybe address those who say, well, that'll take money away from the schools and make them worse.
Yeah, what I would say is I believe that Texas should be leading in liberty and freedom on every dimension. I believe that school choice and education freedom is the civil rights issue of our time. And let me tell you who agrees with me. It's not just national conservative leaders like Senator Ted Cruz and Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. They are all in, doing everything they can to make sure that parents are in charge of their kids' education. You know who else agrees? Almost 80, I think it's 87% of all Republicans in Texas, and around 70% of all Texans, they agree with me. And guess what? That includes a majority of all Republicans, that includes a majority of Democrats, and that includes a majority of independents. Ever since COVID, parents coast to coast have had their eyes open to certain things that are going on in the realm of indoctrination. And let me tell you, DV, I am as pro public school, all right, as you can be. I proudly send my kids to public school. My wife and I have the choice, and we choose to send our kids to public school because you know what? There are so many just amazing public schools in the state of Texas. And I'm blessed to live in an area where I can send my kids to public school and expect that they can receive a quality education. But you know what? We need to not just be selfish. We need to have our eyes open to the plight of the poor, economically disadvantaged children in the state of Texas. For example, kids who are in Austin ISD and their kids, their parents, all they want is for them to receive a quality education. But instead of certain school districts focusing on teaching them how to read and write, what are they doing with that tax money? Because they're monopolists. They don't have to compete. They don't have to focus on education outcomes and making sure every child can read and write. You know what they're doing with their tax money? They're hiring drag queens to come in and perform for second grade and first grade students. That's happening at tax expense. And let me tell you another sobering statistic. In Texas. And let me tell you another sobering statistic. So first of all, I'm very honored that the Speaker of the House appointed me to the Public Education Committee. So I will be working on all education issues here in Texas this session. Okay. I started doing a lot of homework. This is a statistic you need to hear. People need to know this. When you oppose school choice, you are supporting a system that has given us what kind of quality? Statewide, amongst all eighth graders in the state of Texas, do you know how many eighth graders are proficient at mathematics statewide? Do you want to guess?
I can't imagine.
I'm going to tell you, 23%.
Wow.
Do you know how many Texas eighth graders are proficient in reading? 23%. So we have a system that while it works great for rich, if you're a rich Texan, you have school choice. Okay. If you are a Texan that lives in an area with good public schools, hey, things are working for you. But I'm not content with that. I believe every Texas student deserves a quality education. And I believe every parent needs to be empowered with that. And this is not going to harm rural schools. There's not a shred of data that shows that. It hasn't happened in any of the 30 states where it's been tried. And in fact, you know what happens when you have school choice programs, like 31 other states already have? Education outcomes go up. Guess what else happens? It's good for teachers. Teacher pay goes up because there's competition for teachers. And most importantly, it puts parents in charge. Okay, this is something that rural Texas wants in the 10 most rural counties in the state of Texas. Guess what? Among Republican voters in those counties, every single one of those counties supported it when it was on the ballot by over 83%. And guess what? The 9 most rural states in America, states that are far more rural than Texas, every one of those 9 already have programs that empower parents. This will help public schools. This will help private schools. This will help homeschoolers. This will help charter schools. This will empower parents, and this will raise student outcomes. And that's what I'm doing. I'm fighting for every Texas student, not just the rich ones and not just the ones that live in great school districts.
Wow. Okay. And that's one thing that I bring up. Not everybody's fortunate enough to be able to live in Midlothian and those places to go to those schools. Cassie told me, she gave me a time limit. So I'm enjoying this. We got to talk about the border too, man. I'll extend to talk about the border. We got to talk about that. We got to talk about the border. And then, one of the things that came out during COVID is people were seeing what was coming out of schools. And one of them was, this gender stuff and gender modification. And you happen to have did a bill on gender modification. So before we get to that border, can we cover that?
Well, I'm embarrassed that as the state of Texas, we have not done what other states like Florida have done and banned these ghastly and dangerous, untested, unscientific. We don't know the effects of these kids that we are mutilating in the name of so-called gender affirming care. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a parent. You know that. My oldest is 8 years old. If I affirmed everything that my young children wanted to do, I'd be the worst parent in America. The idea that we're letting these young kids who we don't allow to buy a beer or a cigarette or go see an R-rated movie, that they're going to make these decisions that will alter their body, destroy the natural order of their physiology and their anatomy for life, make them a lifetime medical patient. This is ghastly. Why do we allow this in the state of Texas? This should have been banned already. It's been banned in Florida. I filed a bill to say nobody under the age of 18 can have a gender modification procedure. And then I filed another bill that says, you know what, for adults, I'm not going to speak to the legality of that. If you're a 25 or 35-year-old or 45-year-old and you want to make a life decision like that, okay. But you know what you can't do? You cannot force your neighbor to have to pay for it. No Texan should have to pay for their neighbor's sex change. I modeled it after the Hyde Amendment, which is a federal bipartisan agreement on abortion that says, you know what, no matter how you feel about abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, let's just all agree that tax money shouldn't fund that. So I filed that exact same bill for gender modification procedures in Texas. No tax money for any sex change. And then if you're under 18, we have got to protect Texas children from these, I'm sorry, there's a profit motive for this, but we are destroying the future functioning of otherwise beautiful, healthy Texas children by allowing these gender modification procedures. We need to ban that, and we have to ban that this session. If we don't do that, that's a failure on the Texas legislature.
Okay. Now back to the one thing that we were chomping at the bit, the border. Fentanyl is. Did you see the testimony from that lady who was talking about her son killed from fentanyl in Congress when they did it in front of about the border? I don't know if you saw that, but that was heart-wrenching.
Yeah, I think I saw a clip of it, but the sad reality is that there's so many stories like that. I don't know if I saw her particular one, but it's countless at this point.
Fentanyl, people, drugs, everything is pouring over the border. We've had more. It's like, these numbers are astronomical. What is Texas doing?
Well, we are doing a lot, and we are in a very unfair situation to us. I don't want the federal government doing a lot. I think you know that. But one of the few things they're supposed to do is secure our border, protect Americans from the cartels that are running wild. They're the only ones that have control of that border right now, not the Biden administration. It's the Mexican coyotes and cartels. There's never been a better marketing or advertising campaign for the human traffickers and the coyotes and the drug cartels than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's open border policy. And we in Texas, we're the first impacted. We're the most impacted. We've already had to spend between $3 and $6 billion of my neighbors and your neighbors' hard-earned money to try and do the job that Joe Biden won't and secure that border. But you know what? I think we need to do more. When I was in the Trump administration, Title 42 was put in place out of my agency, HHS. That's what allowed us to immediately deport illegal immigrants when they crossed. And at our peak, when we were running that program, 90% of illegal aliens were deported within 2 hours. It was a successful program. I believe in Texas, since Joe Biden is forcing us to live under a continued state of COVID public health tyranny, Texas needs to use every tool at our disposal to secure that border, and that includes using our public health authorities. So I filed a Texas Title 42 Act that would let the state of Texas do the same thing that was happening during the Trump administration and immediately deport illegal aliens the minute they cross, unless they come through a legal port of entry, do the job Joe Biden won't, help save Texas, help save Americans, secure the border, and defeat the Biden border crisis. We've got to do everything we can.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I've seen you. You've been busy, and you've also been on some bigger names, and I hope that people will watch you on those. So I do appreciate that you still continue to show me love and come on the show and talk to the people of Ellis.
I rarely disagree with you, but there is not a bigger name or a bigger show than the Ellis County Talker. Okay, so don't even say that. That's offensive to you and to me and to your listeners, buddy.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. So you wanted to close out and tell the people of Ellis County anything before we shut down?
Yeah, just what an incredible honor it is. My staff, I think I've got the hardest working, most committed team in the Texas legislature. We are here every day, extremely late. We are in the office extremely early. And I have been so happy to see so many my friends and neighbors and constituents from Ellis County come down and visit us. I would say to all of you, we're here till June. If you have friends, if you've got family, if you've got kids that you want to come and let them see their government at work, email me. Call me, come to my office. Let me take you into the floor of the house if we're not, voting on things. Come in the gallery and walk us work. Let us arrange a tour for you. I have a 100% meeting policy for any constituent. I'm blessed to serve 200,000 Texans. That's a lot of people. The schedule is crazy. But if you are one of the 200,000 Texans that has put your faith in me to be your voice in government, I have a 100% policy. I will meet with you if you request it for any reason, for any topic. My staff knows it. It keeps my schedule very busy, but I love nothing more than hearing from the people that I'm honored to represent, because the title is representative. And you know what? I can't represent folks if I don't know them. So I know a lot of people, but if there's ever anything that you, your friends, your viewers, they got questions on, things they need help with the government, ideas they have on government, I would love nothing more than to talk to you on the phone or come on down to Austin and meet with me in person.
I can attest to that, because I actually went to his office to talk to him about the Veterans Court, and he met with me. He just, and I was able to talk with him about that. So I could attest to that. Mr. Harrison, thank you so much again for coming on. And Cassie, thank you. I'm sorry I went over. It was great having you on, and hope to have you again soon.
No, I enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. We will be on again soon. And I hope to see you in person, not just on a computer screen here very soon, my friend. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for keeping Ellis County informed on what their representatives and civil officials are doing for them. You're providing a great service, buddy.
Thank you. That means so much to me. You take care.
Take care, my friend.